Welcome to Onward podcast. Please be advised that this episode contains discussions on highly sensitive topics, including alcohol addiction, gambling addiction, suicidal thoughts, PTSD, severe mental health challenges, and strong language. If you feel that these topics may be triggering for you, we recommend refraining from listening. We encourage you to prioritize your mental health. Thank you for understanding, and now let's begin the interview. Hello and welcome back to Onward podcast. Today we have an amazing guest with us, Steve Kirby, and he has got maybe one of the most exceptional stories in construction I've ever heard. So, Steve, can you give us a bit of an introduction into who you are and why you do what you do?
Now then, Fish, how you doing?
Yeah, good.
So,
Good.
I'm good. My name's Steve Kirby. I am 46. Worked in construction for 20 years. Bit of background. I'm off a council estate in Hull. Single parent family for the majority of my childhood. Just me, my mum, my sister. And yeah, I've walked my way through life to where I am today.
Steve, like when you say like council estate in Hull, what's that life like as a young person? You know, single parent household. What is it like? Because I'm actually from a similar background. My dad passed away when I was like 2 or 3. My mum raised me, my sister, and my brother in a council estate in East London. So, what's it like for you in Hull?
Looking back, it was just my life, is what I knew. But like, I loved my childhood, stuff I experienced. It's made me who I am today, I suppose. But yeah, it was tough. Like, mum struggled a lot, didn't have no money. There was a lot of different gangs in and around the Eastall area where I was from. So from a really young age, you had to kind of be tough, because if you wasn't, you got bullied, you got took advantage of. Yeah, it was hard, but at the same time, and also I got in bits of trouble, never really went to school. And I think all that was a part of just the area I grew up in. You know, like, even my uncles used to say that I'll probably end up in prison when I'm older, because of what I was doing and where I was from. But as I said, it's a big part of all of that is why I am who I am today and what I do. So yeah, it's tough, but it's good.
100%. As in, like, yeah, I think I can relate to that. And I think, in all honesty, I think a lot of construction workers can relate to that story, because I think a lot of us have come from, you know, I hate using the word troubled upbringing, but I think if we're being truthful, it is a troubled upbringing. It's a hard upbringing. It's a rough one.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I ended up in construction and demolition, because I had no GCSEs or qualifications to do much else. In my early teens, like when I first left school, I trained as a joiner for 2 years, but hated it, ended up leaving. I then ended up getting a job in a casino as a croupier, dealing roulette and blackjack for about a year. But again, it just wasn't for me. And then at the age of 20, I was offered a job for a demolition company, which also had a civil side, like groundwork and stuff. And yeah, from the day I started, I loved it, being around the machinery and the hot work and everything. I was starting off as a labourer, but within 3 years, I obtained my 360 ticket and my dumper and my loading shovel and my crusher. And yeah, I became a plant operator, which then took me on for the next 17 years.
It's crazy how when you find something you're passionate about, it's like time just flies, isn't it? One thing after another, you consistently achieve stuff, and you look back and go, "My God, how did that happen? How did it happen so quickly?" Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Out of all of the construction industry, you went into demolition. Now, that is no easy job to get into. Why demolition? What kind of attracted you into that?
There was a massive project going on in Hull, where I'm from, like literally 10 minutes away. And a couple of my uncles was working on there, and it was one of them who had a word and got me in. And yeah, like I say, I started off just literally, I was running after people, cleaning stuff up, like not really doing much to begin with. But then I saw the machines working, like 35-ton machines and stuff, and I just thought, I want to be one of them. So once I'd been in there a while and I had a good relationship with management and whatnot, they put me through the training, and yeah, it was tough. Like, but even then, I mean, like, we used to soft strip buildings before they came down. So you're taking all the wood out, all the door frames, anything, just leaving it as bare brick, concrete. And it was just raving about with a sledgehammer. It was ace. It didn't feel like work at the time. It was tiring, but it was good. But as we used to say, like, we're roughy tufty demolition men. I ended up, once that job finished, I ended up working all over the country, nuclear sites and also.
Oh, wow.
And obviously you're away from home like 5 nights a week, traveling on a Sunday, coming back on a Friday. But again, with that came the lifestyle, like, was living in a pub. So he was just finishing work and sat in pub every night.
Okay.
So, and being a young lad as well, first thing I'd do is find the nightclub. So I'd be clubbing till 2, 3 in the morning, and then turning up at work at 7.
God blimey. You know, I've got to admit, like being a Sparky myself, I can relate to that. But if I tried to do that at the age of 30, I'd be a write-off for a couple of days. I ain't got it in me no more.
No, I'm 46 now, and I don't drink, so I still go out on a weekend and have a Pepsi Max, but I hadn't had a hangover for a long time, so it's all good. I know if I did have a drink, it'd last 3 or 4 days. It's not worth it.
Yeah, you know it. You absolutely know it. But here's an interesting thing, right? Like, being in the construction industry in that era where it was, after work, go to the pub, have a drink, have a chat about your day, have a mess about with whatever, it's like things have changed hugely now. Like, after, a day's work, I don't see many construction workers at the pub unless it's a Thursday or a Friday. Like, do you think that's a good thing or do you think that's a bad thing?
No, I think it's definitely a good thing.
Really?
Again, when it comes to alcohol, a lot of people don't even realise, like, the units on alcohol. So like a pint will have maybe 2.5, 2.6 units. And I never knew that. I never knew what that was for. I now know that 1 unit takes 1 hour to leave your system. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so if you're drinking like 10 pints after work, maybe not, even if you're drinking 5 pints and you stop drinking at like 11:30, go home, that's going to take 5 pints is going to be like about 13 hours to come out your system. Yeah. So when people are waking up the next morning and feeling a bit rough, they're not just feeling rough, they're actually under the influence still, and then driving to work. And so, yeah, I think it's a good thing, and I think there needs to be a lot more education around alcohol and substance and how long it's in your system for people. Because I know I never intentionally turn up at work with alcohol in my system.
Of course.
But I just thought I had a hangover. But if I was drinking till 2 o'clock in the morning, even though I've had a sleep, I'm still under the influence. So I think do what you want to do on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but on a school night, just try and stay clear of it.
You know what? I actually had no idea. Like, everyone reads, it's 2 point whatever units for it. I didn't know it was the units actually account for how long it's in your system. I just thought, okay, cool. There's actually no explanation of that, is it? I've never known that, so that's actually fascinating.
Yeah. Like I say, one unit takes 1 hour to leave your system. So if you calculate what you're drinking, it can make a massive difference on helping people cut their alcohol content down.
Just a heads up, by the way, I am going to take notes in this podcast because honestly, like, we've briefly spoken and I just find you so inspirational. I wish I had a notebook and pen every time we spoke because, like, honestly, like, I've definitely taken notes because, I definitely admire what you've got. I just can't wait to get into your story even more because it's just, bit of a fan of yours now. So. But yeah, so here's I guess a controversial topic to what you've said, right? One of the places back in the day men would go and speak about their emotions, even if it's not like, oh mate, I'm having, like, actually, like, deep dive into it. There was a surface level of, like, conversation people would have in a pub where they'd go, oh, you know, I'm fucking this and I'm, you know, having a fucking shit day or whatever, and just get it out of their system. Now that isn't happening nowhere near as much, especially in London where a pint costs like £8-9.
Yeah.
Do you think that's like, obviously the positive of it is you shouldn't really be drinking that much, and now that you know what one unit actually means, wow, it's crazy to go into work in such a risk high environment being under the influence. But also on the same token, men's mental health, like where is it that we can now talk about our stuff, our feelings?
Yeah, and again, good question. And it's for me, it was always difficult anyhow. Like before we get to the accident, what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
When I was up until like the age of 32, I didn't really talk about. I never really struggled with mental health. I think, as I said, back from my childhood and where I come from, I probably was mentally and physically quite tough, especially mentally tough. And I'd gone through stuff like relationship breakups and stuff like we all do, like life hits. But never really spoke about it to anyone. Even when I was sat in a pub after work, I remember going through a bit of a difficult time with one of my exes, and we split up, and I signed the house off because we had a mortgage, and we didn't have kids, but it was a bit messy. But anyone said, "Steve, how are you doing?" I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm good," and I'd smile and down a drink. Do you know what I mean? I just dealt with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think a lot of guys still do that. I mean, there is still that. Some guys talk, and again, though, you might be going through something and tell your mate, and sometimes what your mate says is not the right thing. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, have another drink and just forget about it. It done well at that. But I think nowadays there's a lot more. Like there's Andy's Man Club and like Mates in Man and other organisations where men can meet up and talk if they're struggling or if they need to. For me, it's just about getting people to talk and to communicate, and that's a big part of why I do what I do. But yeah, I think now with cost of living and people not going to the pubs and stuff like that, it's definitely made a difference for those that do need that social life to talk. A lot of people now are just buying a crate of beer from a supermarket and sitting in their house, and stuck in their own mind, which is never a good thing.
No, absolutely. And I think and there's another men's club that I've sort of followed, but I haven't really followed, and it's a walking club. And I thought that was, I can't remember what it's called, which is annoying because that would have been a great one to speak about. But it's where basically a group of men will meet up. I think it's like one day of the week, and they'll just all go for a walk and chat. And I just thought that is such a good
I think there's
change.
There's a few of them, like different charities, different organisations do stuff like in the Hull, in the East Yorkshire area where I am. There's quite a few different ones where you can meet up on a Sunday or a Monday evening, and yeah, just go walk, get out, get in nature, and just take it in and talk, and that's and again, even if you haven't got that, my message to anybody is if you're struggling, that's what you need to do yourself. Instead of sat ruminating in your own head in your living room with a beer, just get out and go for a walk. I mean, clear your head.
Yeah, 100%. It's so hard to emphasize how good that will be for that person. But when you're in that headspace of, I don't want to get out of bed, I don't want to do anything, it's just such a challenge to take that first step.
It is. It's difficult. And a lot of people don't even realise how much they're struggling. You know, like they're just telling themselves that I'll be all right, and they're not. The first step is to admitting that you're having more bad days than good days. You haven't got the energy to get out of bed. Basically, just by getting out of bed and setting small goals, will improve that energy. Even though you feel tired, it's just because of where your mindset's at. But the more you actually do, the more energy you'll create, and you start to feel better about yourself.
100%. And it's we were talking about this just the other day, where it's like it's that one small step, and then the next small step, and the next small step, and in a month's time, you look back and go, holy shit! I've walked out of that bad headspace into a good one, but without realizing it's those small things you do every single day that gets you there.
A great saying that I say to all my clients and anybody else is, nothing changes if nothing changes. If you keep getting up, doing the same thing day in and day out, and you're not happy, nothing is going to change. If you make just one small change, that'll have a major impact on where you're going and where you're at.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And talking about major impacts, now you've probably got one of the hardest stories to listen to out there. Like, just, personally, I couldn't believe it, but you up for sharing that horrific day?
Yeah. As you know, I'm a very, very lucky guy to be sat here today.
Yeah.
I'm a very lucky guy. But basically, as I said earlier, I've worked all over the country with demolition, with construction. But going back to 2011, so almost 14 years ago, I was 32. And again, at 32, if anybody said to me, oh, I'm depressed or I'm down, I was that guy saying, oh, man up, get on with it.
Yeah.
It's what you're going to do, stay in bed all day. It's an excuse to stay off work. If you can physically do your job, then I've got no sympathy. You know what I mean? Just get on with it. That was my attitude towards mental health. And then on the 11th of January 2011, we just had 2 weeks off for Christmas. I was working on a site local to Hull. As a 360 operator, I had dug out a 60-metre trench before the Christmas. And as a team, we installed 60 metres of 600mm thermal insulated pipe for a high-pressure fire hydrant system.
Mm-hmm.
On return to work, my belief, what I thought I was going to be doing was starting to break out and dig out the next section for the next section of pipe. Now, I got up that morning, again, I was living close to where I was working. I had breakfast with my 2 kids. Harry was 4, Joe was 8. Got them ready for school and nursery, give them a kiss. And I said, right, boys, see you tonight. I'm off to work. Normal day, apart from it was thick snow, it was cold, it was icy. It was a typical January winter's day.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I thought when I got to work, we won't be doing anything because the weather's too bad. But when we had our briefing, they said, right, basically that section of pipe needs hydrostatic pressure testing before we can start the next section.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea what a hydrostatic pressure test was. I'd never seen it and I had no training, not done it. My background was more demolition than civils. So it sounded simple. Fill the pipe with water. When there's water coming out the valve, shut the valve off, put the pump on and pressurize it to 28 bar of pressure, which again, I didn't know what 28 bar of pressure was. I had no idea about pressures and levels.
Mm-hmm.
And they even said that they should have got a specialist team in, but because it was so soon after Christmas, they struggled getting anyone. So we had a guy from an agency who had a Streetworks card, and that Streetworks card gave him the competency, if you like, to watch us do this task. And it sounded simple. So we get onto site. We'd gone through all the RAMs, SAN permits, risk assessments, method statement. Gets to site, we do our on-site risk assessment in the work area, make sure everything's safe. And then I'm a digger driver. I didn't have nothing to do, basically. So I get in my machine, turn the heaters on, turn the radio on, sit back, and all I've got to do is watch these guys get this passed off, and then I can start work again. Now, they started pressurising the pipe, and after about an hour, it started leaking at the spigot end, at the flange. And it was only a small leak, but the guy from the agency said, right, turn the pump off, get in, tighten up that nut and bolt. There's 24 nuts and bolts on the flange. Get in and tighten up. So we had 2 young lads with us, Anthony and Jordan, and they both get in the trench. You've got Jordan sat on the spigot end with a spanner. You've got Anthony in front of it with another to get the leverage to tighten it up. They tighten it up, they get out. Another hour or so passes, it starts leaking again at 5 bar in a different area. So again, they do the same, they stop the job, tighten it up. Then gets to lunchtime, and we started this at like 8:30. It's dinner time, and it started leaking at 10 bar. Now, we get told back then, and it's the same today, if something doesn't feel right, just stop what you're doing.
Yeah.
So something didn't feel right. Like these guys getting in and sitting on this spigot end and tightening it up, it just... The fact it had leaked a couple of times. So I got out my machine and I said, guys, stop what you're doing a minute. Just before you go back in there, somebody go to the office and let the manager know what's going on. So the guy from the agency wasn't happy. He was like, just get it up to pressure. I was like, no, I want to get it checked. So one of the lads goes in the van, 5-minute drive to the office, sees the manager, tells him what I've just said. It's leaked a few times. His words was, what has the agency guy said? He said, oh, you just keep saying tighten it up. So the manager then went onto his laptop and went onto St. Gobain's website and manufactured this pipework. And it stated on there that this design, if it's all put together correctly, it can't go nowhere. That the spigot end won't come off. It can be tested up to like 38 bar of pressure. So the manager said, oh, just go carry on doing what you're doing. Get it up to pressure. So Jim comes back. They used to call me Fatty. They was like, Fatty, get back in your machine. He said, it's all right. It can't go nowhere. So the guy's tightening it. It then got 2 minutes past 3. And I heard Jordan shout, oh, for fuck's sake, it's leaking again.
Yeah.
And it was at 18 bar. Now, it's 2 minutes past 3. It's nearly home time. We finished work at 4. It was at 18 bar and we still had 10 bar to go. Now, in my mind, I'm sat there thinking, we're going to be here till stupid o'clock tonight because it's taken this long to get to 18. We've still got 10 bar to go. Now, I knew that I was physically stronger than Anthony and Jordan. I was about 2.5 stone heavier than I am now. I was like bodybuilding religiously. So I wasn't being gung-ho. I just knew that I could get it tight. So I jumped out of my machine. I said to Jordan, give us your harness. I'm going to tighten it up. They was all like, yes, go on, Fatty, you do it. Get it done. So I put the harness on. I had the spanners in my hand. I got on the ladder to enter the trench. As I got on the ladder, luckily I passed the spanners back to one of the other lads. I then get in the trench. The pipe's 600 mil and the trench is only about 1,200. There's not a lot of room in there. I'm 16 stone. So I'm stood in front of the spigot end. And then as I reached up to get the spanners, the end blew off. But, excuse me. I don't remember a bang. I don't remember nothing. But I remember reaching for the spanners. But then my next memory is I'm trapped underwater. I don't know where I am. I thought I was in the local river. I thought I was in the Humber. I had no idea where I was. I didn't know how I got there. I just woke up underwater. And because of, I thought it was like the current, but it wasn't. Obviously, it was just the pressure for what had come out the pipe. The only way I can explain it is like being in a washing machine. And I was just getting whirled around. But I didn't know which way was up. And I truly believed I was going to die. I'm not a religious person, but I was praying to God, please, please, I can't leave my kids. I can't leave my boys. Obviously, my ex-partner, I was thinking of her. I was crying. I was screaming for my mum. I remember like physically screaming for my mum. And when they say your life flashes before you when you're in that moment, I was only drowning, I know now, for probably about a minute, like just over a minute. Basically, when it blew, all the lads ran because there was a massive blast and a lot of water. Yeah. So they all ran to protect themselves. And then by the time they'd composed themselves, turned around, Jordan saw me just laid face down in the trench. And I thought I was fighting to get out. I wasn't. I was just laid face down in the water. Jordan then jumps in the trench, lifts me up. And as he lifts me up, I just remember seeing loads of faces because everyone in the work area on the site that I heard the bang came running to see what had happened. And everybody was screaming at me to breathe. They were all shouting, Steve, breathe. And I remember looking around thinking, somebody please help me. I was still drowning because I'd swallowed that much water. I couldn't breathe. My lips had gone blue. Face was just grey or white. With that, Jordan passed me out of the trench. And as he passed me out of the trench, the water dislodged and I was able to get my breath. Now, considering the blast and the size, like the spigot end that blew off weighed 460 kilogram, the impact from that spigot end moved my 8-ton digger arm 2 meters, like to the end of the trench. So there's a lot of force come from that spigot end. If that had hit me, it would have cut me clean in half at the waist. But I think what had happened was there was that much air trapped in the pipe because it wasn't level, and that's part of the reason it failed. There was that much air trapped in the pipe that when we was trying to compress it, the percussion from the blast has thrown me out the way in the air before the spigot end's actually blown off. So literally, I know that I was thrown in the air because both of my work boots was found 20 feet away on another part of the site. So I must have gone quite high with a lot of pressure through my body in order for my boots to fly off as far as they did. And then I've probably landed back in the water, and then that's when I've woke up, when I'm in the water. Now, physically, I was really, really lucky. So I'd hit my head. I needed 7 or 8 stitches in the back of my head. I had pipe bedding, so gravel stuck in my face, my chest, my shoulders, like shrapnel where it's blown at me. My boiler suit and my harness had been blown clean off, and my arms had gone hyperextended, so my shoulders and my elbows had gone the wrong way, like tearing all my tendons. My legs, and I didn't break any bones, but like my legs, my feet was just battered from the pressure from the impact. So I was battered, I was bruised, and I needed stitches, I needed clearing up, done a lot of tendon, ligament damage. But yeah, really, really lucky. 14 years later, almost now, I still struggle. I was told I was told I'll never lift weights again, and if I did and I went heavy, my biceps had snapped because of the damage to my tendon. About a year or so after the accident, no, maybe a couple of years after the accident, I felt all right, so I started training again, and literally as soon as I did, my bicep snapped, and I needed surgery to reattach it. So the doctors weren't kidding. So it does still impact me now, 14 years later, physically. But again, I know how lucky I am. It was explained to me that there's more chance of winning the lottery than there is of surviving that accident. So I literally won the lottery that day. Do you know what I mean? That's how lucky I was. So, but yeah, for me, it was the mental health journey that it took me on, which is why I am who I am today and do what I do.
Steve, like, I don't even, like, it just makes me speechless that the manager turned around and said, let's let the agency guy run with it, and done a quick Google search without even stepping out of the office to check what the situation was. Like, that's a huge, colossal mess up. And then to actually be in that situation, and mate,
that's part of why I now do what I do, like working with businesses and sharing the story, because there's a lot to learn from from the boots on the ground, like where I was. If you're not trained, if you might be confident to have got something, especially if it sounds really easy. But if you haven't had the training, you're not competent. You don't know all the risks. Even if it sounds easy like that did, fill a pipe with water, pressurize it. If a manager is then telling you that it can't go nowhere, you're going to take that as gospel because they know. Do you know what I mean? They're the boss. So from a manager's perspective, if somebody ever comes to you and says, I don't, something's happening, I don't understand it, but whatever, instead of just explaining it to them, they need to get off their ass and go and have a look at the face of work and see it from their own perspective, because then they're gonna see exactly what it is. If our manager had actually come out, he'd have seen that the pipe wasn't level; it had floated because the site had flooded. So if it was level, it'd have probably been fine. Even if the end blew off, there'd have been nowhere near the force if there wasn't any air in there. But because there was a lot of air in there, we created a cannon. So yeah,
absolutely bonkers. Just to think, like, I think there's not enough appreciation of how dangerous a construction site actually is. And even those easiest jobs of essentially tightening up a nut and bolt can be like catastrophic. And 100%. We just have no awareness about this at all.
No, but when you work in that industry and you've been in and around that day in and day out, we become complacent.
Of course.
It's like walking next to a 22-ton machine, which is loading a dumper or something. You don't think now to just walking past it. Yeah, if he slows around and doesn't see you, which he's probably not going to see you, then you're going to die instantly. Or if a dumper comes along and he doesn't see you, and that dumper hits you, you know what I mean? It's a high risk place. There's a lot of potential for not just an accident but fatalities.
Yeah.
Yet people still cut corners and take risks.
Of course. Like, I remember working on a construction site in King's Cross, and as you do in a riser cupboard, your mate's working below you, you're working above, and he needs one of your tools. You don't walk down the stairs and give him a tool. You just go, there you go, mate, drop it down, and he'll
Yeah,
catch it. But we don't think we're like 4 or 5 floors up. If that screwdriver
yeah.
or whatever just slips and goes down, and someone else is working below, that is gonna crack their skull.
And
It's
like I said,
crazy.
we never do anything intentionally.
Of
You're
course,
always
yeah.
doing it. You're always doing to help out or to get the job done. Like you want to get the job done, so
Yeah.
you're taking shortcuts in a sense because you think it'll be all right. None of us believe it'll happen to me. When you go to work in the morning, you're not going to work believing you're going to be involved in an accident. And we hear of incidents like mine or like many others out there, and you think, oh, I mean, that was hard. But then we carry on doing what we're doing, and we don't think it's going to happen to us, but it can happen to any one of us at any time.
100%. And it's so important that you've taken the courage, and it is courage, to come out there and say to the world, this, it don't matter what type of macho geezer I was, this can happen to anyone. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, how strong you are. Accidents happen, and when they do, they can be devastating. They can lead to fatalities. It's just you're lucky in a sense, ain't you?
I know how lucky I was that day. And I know of many incidents where pipes have failed at a lot less pressures and people have died instantly. It's not very often you're going to have a failure like the one I was involved in and actually hear about it because it's a fatality. So
Yeah.
I know how lucky I am. And if me sharing my story and my mental health journey because of this incident, we can take a lot of lessons from it, then for me, I'm a believer that everything happens for a reason, and we take lessons and we share those lessons to help others, and we move on. Now that accident could have destroyed me; it nearly did, but I am who I am today because of that incident. I'm doing what I'm doing because of that accident. So when I do talks like all over, well, in Europe, all over the UK, my intention isn't to change the mindset of every single person in that room because that's impossible. It'd be nice to think that, but there'll be some people that just think, "Oh, well, you're all right now." Don't know like what you're going on about. But if one person in that room changes the way they behave on site or thinks a bit differently around safety or talks about the mental health, that's the reason I relive it and share it as I do because I want to make that difference, even if it's for that one person.
Mate, that's amazing. What an inspiration. In the worst way you can possibly be one, but in the most positive outcome. It's just such an amazing story to share, but sadly it doesn't end there, does it? It's like you had this horrific accident at work, and again, only if you're comfortable to deep dive into this to talk about the mental health journey you went through from that. The next step to that was even worse, I think.
I'm happy to share because hopefully someone can take something from it and it helps them. But as I said, that day of the accident, if you would have told me but you were struggling with depression, I'd just said, man up. If you was told me you was suicidal, I'd be like, what are you telling me for? Do you know what I mean? I don't need to know. Go and do it or talk to somebody. But I don't need to know. I had no empathy. I had no sympathy. And then the accident happened. I went to hospital. I had a lot of x-rays, a lot of scans. I got stitched up. Because I've got a head injury, because I drowned, they want to keep me in for observations. But all I want to do is get home to my 2 boys. I never believed I was going to see him again. It was like I couldn't walk, but I could shuffle. I couldn't move my arms. My arms were stuck in this position. But I just needed to get home to my kids and to my partner at the time. And about midnight that night, I got home. I laid with the boys until they fell asleep. And then when I tried to go to sleep, the second I nodded off, if you like, the moment I fell asleep, I relived every second of that incident. the smells, the sounds, the bubbles, praying to God, please, please, I can't die, screaming for my mum. I can see it now. I relived every single moment as real as what this is. And then Katie woke me up and she said, you're having a nightmare. And I was having a full-on panic attack, something I'd never had. And I couldn't breathe. I thought I was having a heart attack. I couldn't stop shaking. I'm sweating. Katie got me a glass of water and I calmed down. An hour or so later, when I tried to fall asleep again, I was back there reliving everything exactly as I did during the accident. So my way of dealing with that the next day was we still had a fridge full of beer from Christmas. We've just had Christmas. So I said, pass us a can, please. And she would, like, the ex was like, it's dinner time. You know what I mean? You can't drink. She said, you can't drink anyhow. The hospitals give you the strongest painkillers they could give you. You can't drink alcohol on them. And I was like, I just need a drink to set the edge off. I couldn't stop shaking. I was like, I just need something to set the edge off. And I think part of my background in demolition, construction, being from where I'm from, alcohol was always something that I turned to, whether it was because I was down or whether it was because I was celebrating. And I just thought a beer will take the edge off and stop me shaking, calm me down. But that one beer ended up being 10 or 12, whatever was left in the fridge, I finished off. The following day, it was whatever spirits we had lying about, Jack Daniels, vodka, whatever was left from Christmas. I couldn't actually get up to go and pour myself a drink, and Katie refused. So when Katie was out of the room, I was getting Joe, my 8-year-old son, to run in the kitchen and pour me a quick drink so I could down it. Once all that had gone over the next few days, we didn't have anything in. And I said, we just had Christmas as well. We lived week to week. We had no money. We just literally had loans and my credit cards and that for Christmas. And I didn't know when I was going to be back at work either. Obviously, I didn't know how serious my injuries was. And I said to Katie, look, you just need to go to the shop and get me a drink. And she was like, no. So we ended up having a massive argument. Like I screamed and shouted at her until she did as she was told, basically. And I said, just get me a 3.5 litre bottle of cheap cider. You know, there was only about 3.5, 4 quid at the time. I was like, just get me a bottle of cider. Now, I started drinking one of them every single day. And then it ended up being 2 of them. And then the more I drank, the more I self-medicated. Looking back, I didn't see it at the time, but I was angry, I was agitated, I was up, I was down, I was stressed. I remember Harry coming to jump on me because he wants to play with his dad. And I physically pushed him away and said, go to your mum. And he ran off crying. And I remember in that moment, Joe's playing with his toys, doing nothing wrong. And I'm like, you, get all that cleared up, get upstairs, get out my sight. I was taking all my frustrations and everything out on those. Me and Kate was already arguing because of all the drinking. So we'd been arguing for weeks. But then I'd go and sit in the bathroom and cry my eyes out thinking, why am I being like this? Because I knew I was being a wanker. I knew I was being horrible. But it was just a reaction. I just couldn't stop myself. And then I'm crying thinking, why am I being like this? I'd splash my face. I remember walking out and Katie saying, are you all right? And me smiling and going, yeah, of course I am. I'm dealing with it. Now, I wasn't dealing with it. I was in a really, really dark place. I started believing that I should have died that day. I didn't even leave the house to go for... I was at physio because I needed cortisone injections in my elbows to be able to move my arms, like steroid injections. And I didn't leave the house because I thought if I go outside, death's going to catch up with me because I cheated death. So I just stayed in and drank and went deeper into this dark hole. I was gambling like online to try and win money that I couldn't even afford to gamble, but I got a loan off. I remember getting a loan off the local Provident guy who used to come around and give loans. And I didn't even know when I was going to be back at work to pay it, but I needed that money. And with that money, I ended up losing the majority of it through gambling it anyhow, because I was trying to win more. So I was in full self-destruct mode. I remember Katie as well. My mum was helping me out and like dropping me drink off and money. And Katie told my mum not to get me anything because I was getting worse. So my mum refused to give me any money or to drop me any alcohol off. I then used emotional blackmail with my mum and said, look, if you're not going to help me, don't come and see the kids because you're not seeing them. And I fell out with my mum. And then I fell out with my sister because I fell out with my mum. Again, me and Katie was constantly arguing. I'm shouting at the boys. Everybody that I'd loved, I pushed away. Everyone that I could think about when I was drowning, and I was praying, please, please, I can't die. None of them in my mind liked me anymore because I'd fallen out with them. So then the thoughts got even darker, and I started thinking, why am I waiting for death? Why don't I just go and do it?
Steve, sorry, can I just interrupt you for 1 second? This is a lot. Like, I just want to say, like, forget podcasting, forget clickbait, forget everything. Are you comfortable sharing the rest of this? Because this is, like, my hands are sweating right now, and I don't want to put you in a position where you feel uncomfortable. I do not want to do that.
No, this for me is important to share, and this is why I share it all over the UK, because if somebody can hear it or see it and reflect and see themselves in the way I was being, then hopefully they'll reach out for help, and that's why I do what I do. So, but yeah, my thoughts became really, really dark. So, trigger warning, I am going to talk about suicide. But I started thinking of ways to end my life, but I didn't want my kids to find me. I didn't want my Katie to find me. I didn't want any of my family to be traumatized for the rest of their lives. So I was thinking of ways how I could just disappear, because I knew if I disappeared, they'd get over me. And eventually. And the only way I could think to do that, living in Hull, where I'm from, was the Humber Bridge. So we're now talking about 14 weeks after the accident. And Katie had popped to her mum's with the kids. I've been drinking all day. And I just sat there and I thought, right, now's my time. You know, like, they're out the house. So I got in my car and I drove and I got to the bridge. And I don't know if you know of the Humber Bridge, but in this area, it is a suicide spot. They do have a mental health hub on there now, and they do have people patrolling the bridge, talking to people. But back then, there was kind of none of that. And there's quite a few people actually ended their lives that way. And I drove to the bridge because I thought if I jump the bridge, I'll either get lost in the mud, no one will find my body, or I'll get washed out where I'll either into the North Sea where no one's going to find me, or it'll be a Coast Guard or something that finds me. So it's not going to put that trauma on anyone close. And that's just where my head was. And I got to the bridge, and I remember sitting in my car, and I was kind of like looking across, and I just, knowing what it feels like to drown when I was trapped underwater, I never considered that about the bridge. And then when I got there, knowing that, I just couldn't get out my car. I froze. I basically didn't have the balls to do it. So I just sat in my car for, I don't know how long it was, but I literally sat in my car for hours just crying. And I thought, I'm useless. What do I do? You know, like, how do I get out of this? How do I get away from this? And eventually I had to turn around and go home. And when I got home, Katie was waiting for me. And she's screaming at me, where have you been? And I couldn't tell her where I'd been because I didn't want to worry her, even though obviously they was all worried anyhow. So we had a massive argument. And then she said, Steve, you either ring a doctor and get help, or you pack a bag and leave, because we can't live like this. It's not fair on the kids. It's not fair on anyone. So I went upstairs and started packing a bag, because in my mind I was going anyhow. But while I was packing the bag, all of a sudden I had the most vivid flashback again. And I'm trapped underwater and I'm praying to God, please, 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 I can't leave my kids. I can't die, I can't leave my kids. And then it just hit me like a brick exactly what I was planning and what I was doing and where I was at. And I just had a full-on breakdown. I fell to the floor, I was crying, I was shaking, I couldn't breathe. Katie came running up, the boys came running up, we were all crying. And she said, right, I'm ringing a doctor. Doctor came out to me. He said, Steve, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a GP, but I can tell you you're suffering from PTSD, anxiety, depression. He said, and I'm going to get you the support that's needed. He got me an appointment at a mental health hospital in Hull the next day at Victoria House. And I went, my dad took me, I sat with a therapist, and I told her everything I've just told you, but a lot more detail. And there was a lot more around the self-destruct, the gambling, the intrusive thoughts. And this therapist just looked at me with a tear in her eye, and she said, Steve, I'm so sorry, but I can't help you. I'm not qualified enough. She said, but I'm going to speak to my colleagues and I'll get back in touch later. Now, in my mind, nobody could help me. That's where my head was at. And she's just kind of cemented that by saying, I can't help you. So when I got back, the bit when she said, oh, I'll speak to a colleague, we'll be back, and that just went over my head. Like, all I focused on was, I can't help you. I'm not qualified enough. I got back in my dad's car, and on the way home, I said, pull in garage, I need a drink. And he thought I meant a can of Coke or something. And I went in garage and I got the biggest, cheapest bottle of vodka I could get on a credit card. And when I walked out, my dad was like, what you got that for? And I was like, I need a drink. When I got home, Katie was waiting to see what they said and see what was happening. And she just saw the bottle of vodka and turned the other way. She didn't want an argument because she knew if she said something, I'd have just kicked off. I then went upstairs with that bottle of vodka and I laid on the bed and I just started downing it. And I drank that full bottle probably within 5 or 10 minutes. And with every single mouthful, I was just praying, please don't let me wake up. I just didn't want to wake up. I just cried into that bottle until it was all gone and then passed out. And then the following mid-morning, Katie woke me up and she said, Steve, the hospital's rang up, you've got to come in. Now, obviously, I'm feeling absolutely shocking. I said, what's the point? She said, because there's another therapist wants to talk to you. And I was like, there's no point in going. And she was like, look, just get out of bed. And I just didn't want to get out of bed. I was like, no. And then she shouted at the boys and then literally said, do it for them. And with that, I had to get up and I had to go. And it was the best thing I ever did because I sat with a different lady who specialised in PTSD. I sat with her for 4 months for my quota. It was through the NHS. I refused antidepressants all the way through because of the stigma around them. Like, you'd be on them for the rest of your life. I didn't use them. But on my very last session, I still wasn't in a great place. I understood mental health. I understood fight, flight, freeze. I understood what I was going through was because of the trauma. But I still wasn't in a great place. And my therapist said, look, there's a prescription for some antidepressants. I know you don't want them, but just take it so there's something to fall back on if it gets really bad. She said, but what I want you to do, Steve, is go and learn about the mind. So I said, what do you mean? She said, the more you can understand mental health and well-being, the easier it'll be for you if anything triggers, if PTSD kick comes back. She said, start reading about mindfulness. And I started laughing at her. I said, mindfulness, that's all that meditation and all that. I said, nah, that's not for me. I'm a roughy, tufty demolition guy. Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to sit there but she planted a seed. And when I got home that day, I went upstairs and I got my computer out. And the first thing I started reading about was spirituality. I started reading about guardian angels. I started believing that I had somebody with me. And I wasn't supposed to die that day. My mind for a long time had been, I cheated death and I was supposed to die. All of a sudden it started flipping and it was like, no, if Anthony and Jordan were still in that trench, they could both be dead now. I got in there and I survived. I got in there for a reason. I wasn't supposed to die, but I was supposed to get in there. And then the more I read on spirituality and I started reading about different religions, different cultures, it started opening my mind a little bit more. I then came across mindfulness, started doing cold showers every morning just for the discipline, just to show myself that my mind wasn't in control of me, I'm in control of my mind. I started writing a gratitude list every single morning, 10 things that I'm grateful for and why, to get myself in that positive mindset. Excuse me. I started meditating twice a day for 10 minutes, which again at first was difficult. I thought, well, what's happening? But the more I practiced it, the easier it was just to shut off my mind, shut off them thoughts. And yeah, I went on to study so I did self-hypnosis to take myself back to the trauma, to get past the trauma, the triggers. That worked for me. So I started studying hypnotherapy, became a trained hypnotherapist. Not at the time, I had no intention of doing anything with it. It was just for myself, my own self-development.
Mm-hmm.
With the hypnotherapy, I came across NLP and neuro-linguistic programming. Then I came across CBT therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and I just put myself on loads of different courses and learned as much as I could and read as much as I could. And then 6 years ago, I found myself helping so many people just by talking to them in a supermarket or walking down the street. I'd like have a conversation with someone. And I'm not the most approachable person. You know what I mean? I'm fairly big, bald head, tattoos. People, if I walk towards them, are normally like, "Oh, what's he going to do?" But I'd be like, "Are you all right? Because you don't look all right. Do you know what I mean? You look like you've got some much trouble in you." And people just open up to me. And someone said you should do this as a business, and that's what 6 years ago I set up SK Life Coach UK, as in Steve Kirby Life Coach UK.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know where it was going to take me, but that accident, reaching out, has led me to who I am today. And if my story can help anybody who's feeling anything like what I was feeling, then it's worth why I'm sharing it today.
There's not many times in my life I'm speechless, but I think I need to take a second here and gather my thoughts because
Just process it. When
I think
no,
so.
Yeah, normally when I share this presentation especially within any industry really, but recently it's been mostly construction. The room just goes silent, and at the end I'll be like, "Any questions?" And everybody's like, just like you was then, they're just absorbing it and trying to process it. And everyone's just sat there, and I'm thinking, nobody got any questions, nobody. But because I've shared it so many times now, it's been like therapy in itself for me. So
Yeah,
I
can
do get a bit
imagine.
emotional while I'm talking about the kids and stuff, but I can stand there for an hour and talk about it. But then, yeah, like any questions at the end, I need to give like everyone like 5 minutes just to sit there and process it.
Because it's like your story. Sorry, I'm gonna just process this out loud. Like your story doesn't get better for a very, very, very long time. Like
No.
you go from a rough upbringing to a fucking ridiculously hard traumatic accident at work. And most people would think that's the worst part of it. But that's actually the beginning of how bad it goes from
Yeah. The
drinking,
mental health
gambling.
journey, the mental, like, what I've now learned is no matter how strong you think you are, like physically, mentally, the mind is really, really powerful, but it's also really, really delicate.
Hmm.
And I explain it like, yeah, my people say to me, "Oh, I've gone through some stuff and I'm struggling, but it's nowhere near as bad as what you've gone through." And it's like, no, that's a load of shit, because no one person's trauma is any more or any less than the next person's. It's however it impacts you as an individual. We all deal with stuff differently. Now,
Hmm.
I'd gone through stuff all my life up to that incident and just brushed it off. Nothing really bothered me. But then that incident just flipped a switch in my mind, and all of that confidence that I had, all that like it just went. It just in that accident it shattered, and I lost all my confidence for about a year. I was off work for 7.5 months, and I've lifted weights and been in shape since I was like 16. I used to box for St. Paul's when I was like 14, and then I left there and just took up bodybuilding. Never for competition, just for myself. But that helped me with my mental health. If I had a shit day at work or a tough day or whatever, I'd go and throw some dumbbells about, and that was it. I felt better.
Hmm.
But then after the accident, with the injuries I had, and I was told I'd never lift weights again. Like I built myself up to 16 stone at that point. Bear in mind I'm about 13 now, so it's like 3 stone different. And I was carrying that, but then I couldn't walk, I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything. I was drinking every single day. So by the end of that year, after the accident, I'd lost everything. I'd lost my confidence. I'd lost the way I looked, the way I felt. it took a lot of rebuilding, but you can rebuild it, and I've proved that, and I've shown that. Do you know what I mean? No matter where you're at in life, no matter what troubles you're going through, where you feel you're at, with the right help, by reaching out, you can get to wherever you want to be. Excuse me.
I just want to touch on so many things now. One is, I think something needs to be said about, like, you're shouting at your kids and you're having huge arguments with your ex. Like, obviously that's draining in itself. And I just want to say, like, I can't imagine how that felt for you or your family at the time. But when you look back at that, how are you okay? Like, how are you okay? How are they okay? Because I think everyone gets affected by this.
Yeah, I'm okay now because I know that I'm not that person now.
Yeah.
Like, it's gone,
100%.
it's in the past. It was a tough time for Katie and for the kids. But because of that, once I went onto my journey and started learning about mental health, everything that I was learning, like when I was training, doing my hypnotherapy training, I was using the boys to practice on. So I was getting hypnotizing them and getting them through all sorts of things. But because of what I learned from that, they also learned. And like right through school and into college, there was both mental health ambassadors for the schools, for the colleges. Anybody got any problems, they know they can talk to Harry or Joe. Katie struggled with her mental health a lot, with anxiety and stuff, but she, because of my journey, it helped her. Me and Katie did split up like 3 years ago, but it wants nothing to do with any of that. It was kids had grown up and we were just kind of living like brother and sister. We drifted apart, so we went our separate ways. But yeah, it's like the boys are who they are today because of that. You know what I mean? It was Harry doesn't remember too much. Joe probably remembers more, like shouting at him and screaming at him and sending him to bed early and all the rest of it. But they know now that I had PTSD. I was suffering from depression. I was drinking a lot. I was a different person. So I think as long as, no matter what any of us have done in our past or where we've been, if we keep hold of it and we keep going on about the what ifs and should haves and would haves and could haves, it ends up destroying you.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
We can't change anything. It's done. So we take a positive lesson from it and we let it go. As long as we're a better person today, that's all we can strive for.
100%. And I think it takes a lot to admit that. And I think that's just, it takes so much to admit that. Again, I'll be honest with you, like, I'm not usually speechless, but I think I'm still processing everything that's been said. And in my head, I'm just like, I need you to talk for a few more minutes so I can continue on my head journey.
I'll give you a bit more information for you to be able to, again, it's going to take some processing.
Yeah, for sure.
Going back to the accident, another reason why I share my story and do what I do is when I set up SK Life Coach UK 6 years ago, I put a post on LinkedIn saying a lot of guys, especially within construction, don't want to speak to a therapist, but how about speaking to a coach, somebody who's worked in the industry for 20 years? And I put a little bit on there that I was involved in an accident at work and what happened and why I now do what I do. And one of the top safety guys at Skanska saw this message and he said, "Can I ring you?" So I said, "Yeah." He said, "First of all, how did you survive an 18-bar pressure test failure?" And I said, "I guess I'm just lucky." He said, "Steve, in that same year, in 2011, we had a fatality. One of our workers, pipe failed at 3 bar. It wasn't water, it was gas, but the amount of air that was in the man, that didn't really matter because there was so much air in it. But with this guy's as well, his failed at 3 bar and he died instantly. He stood in front of it like I was." And he said, "There's so much we can learn from your story as somebody who survived it, somebody who got in that trench, the reasons why you got in that trench." He said, "There's a lot we can take away from it." And at the time, I didn't have no information to share. I had no pictures. I had my medical reports, but that's it. Now, I was off work for 7.5 months, but I went back to that site. The principal contractor went on to lose the contract and another contractor, but I kept my job and I was still working on there. Now, the manager took the brunt of it. He got sacked after 2 days, 2 days after the accident. He was like the scapegoat. But I had a good relationship with the client. And I never named the client or the contractor. But really big client, multi-trillion-dollar industry. And I got in touch with the boss and I said, how are you doing? He said, yeah, I'm good. I said, Skanskas asked me to share my story. I said, can I have some information from the investigation that I can share on like a PowerPoint, just to paint a picture, just so they can understand it a bit.
Sorry, when you say investigation, like, are you talking about like the incident reports and stuff like that?
Yeah, basically, that job got shut down for a couple of weeks because there was investigating it.
Okay.
So I knew it was investigated because I had to give statements and all sorts. A lot of agency staff got laid off at the time, and the job got stopped for a short period. So I said, can I have some information anyhow? He said, no, we're not going to want you to do it. And I said, well, I'm not going to mention anybody. It's just a story. He said, leave it with me. I'll speak to my bosses. I'll get back to you. So I left it with him. About 2 weeks passed. I've still not heard anything. So I messaged him, called him, rang him, no answer. So someone said to me, write to the HSE for the freedom of information, and the HSE will give you the full report. Wow, so I thought, all right. So I wrote to the HSE, to the Health and Safety Executive, explained who I was, the day of the accident, what happened. And I got an email back saying, Steve, we don't know nothing about you. We don't know nothing about an accident. It was never reported. I then got in touch with the client again by email, and I said, how come the HSE don't know anything about the accident? He rang me up within 2 minutes. He'd been ignoring me for weeks. He said, what have the HSE said? What do you mean? So I said, well, they hadn't said nothing. They just said it wasn't reported. So he said, oh, come to site and I'll explain how it was reported. Now, going back to the day of the accident, the guys have dragged me out of the trench. It's ice cold water. It's fixed snow. It's freezing. They've stripped me half naked. Most of my top half had blown half off anyhow, but they stripped me half naked and they covered me in wet coat. So I'm laid bleeding, covered in gravel and just shaking. The client had an on-site ambulance, so that ambulance turned up to where we was. The guys out of the ambulance, instead of assessing me instantly, went and assessed the trench and get an idea of what had happened. And there was on the radios. Then they came over to me, asked me if I wanted an ambulance, which I don't remember. It's what I've been told. I just said, no, I'm all right. I'm all right. I didn't know if I needed an ambulance or not. I didn't even know what had happened. So they get me in their ambulance. They strip me completely naked, realise they've got no clothes that'll fit me. As I said, I was like 16 stone. The only thing they had that would fit me was a see-through paper hazmat suit. You know, just the real cheap hazmat suit. So they put me in this suit and put a work coat on me, put a gauze on my head to stop the bleeding. We went to the medical centre on site. They had like the medical facility. And there was a lot of meetings going on, a lot of people huddled up and talking. And then they got me back into the ambulance, and I thought I was going to A&E, to a Royal Infirmary. Sirens, flashing lights, going through site. 2 minutes later, we stopped in the car park, and they got me out of the ambulance and put me into a colleague's car and told him to take me to the minor injuries on the council estate where I'm from, which was just up the road. So,
are you serious?
Yeah, so we go to minor injuries. He's telling me not to die in his car. He's like, Steve, stay with me, because I was in and out. I was falling asleep. He's like, Steve, stay with me. So we get to the minor injuries and it's packed. He sits me down at the back, and then he tells the guy in reception that I need stitches. I've come in because that's why I'd gone in. I need stitches. The guy said, oh, he's going to have to wait. I'll get the nurse to come and see him. Half an hour later, the nurse came out, not even to see me, but she saw me sat there shaking. And she was like, what has happened? So James said, has the company not rang up? He's been in an accident. She said, no one's rang. No one said anything. So she said, what's happened? So he explained. She said, I can't help you. She said, you need to be at A&E now. She said, this is serious. She said, you've got a head injury, you've drowned. Who knows what damage has happened? She said, and then she was determined to get an ambulance, but James said, look, by the time that gets here, I can have him there. So they helped me back because I couldn't walk, but they helped me back into his car. We set off to A&E, and again, I don't remember, but it's what I'm told. But his mobile rang on the way, and it was the manager from the client who worked on the site. And he was like, what's happening? So James said, we've been to minor injuries, but it's worse than that. We need to go to A&E. His words was, for fuck's sake, make sure you're both on site tomorrow. So when I got to hospital and I'm getting assessed and I'm getting scanned...
Wait. What?
So when I'm getting stitched up, when they tell me I've got to stay in because I've got an head injury and I've drowned, I've got to stay in hospital. When they're telling me that, all I can think, I want to get home to my kids, but I've just had Christmas as well. I can't afford to not go to work tomorrow. I need my job. And if the manager's telling me, the top man is telling me I've got to be on site tomorrow, I've got to be on site tomorrow. So I discharged myself and I got home. And as I said earlier, I had flashbacks all night. I had no intention of going to site the next morning. I couldn't move. I was in a lot of pain. But at 8 o'clock, there was a knock at the door, and it was one of the guys from work, and he turned up with a site minibus. And he said, Steve, sorry to do this, but you've got to come on site. You need to give a statement. And I said, I can't move. I can't walk. He said, don't worry, I'll help you. Once you've given your statement, I'll bring you back. So I gets to site. He swipes me in, helps me into the offices. The director comes over and said, I'm so sorry this has happened, Steve, but I need a statement. I said, can I give it now? And he said, no, I need to speak to the other 5 guys first. I'll speak to you about 1:30 this afternoon. They put me in an office where I'm just sat, falling asleep. And then another supervisor saw me and said, what are you doing here? He said, I know why they've got you in. He said, get in my van, I'm taking you home. He then literally carried me into his van and took me home. And then I was off for 7.5 months. Now, where I'm going with this is, if they'd have got me an ambulance, their ambulance couldn't leave site. If they'd have got me an ambulance, then that ambulance has then got a duty to inform the police, or will then inform the health and safety executive. So they
knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, they knew if they got me an ambulance, the HSE would be involved. They also knew that if I didn't go on site the next morning and swipe in, they had a lost time incident and the HSE would be investigating. So they did everything they could to cover it up. Now, where I'm going with this and why I'm passionate about sharing this part of it is, a few months later, Skanska have a fatality doing a very similar job. If the HSE had investigated this incident, then that had gone out across the UK. There'd have been a briefing across all business explaining what had happened and why. And he may have done things differently. And he may still be here today. So whether it's a near miss or whether it's something major, I'm trying to get through to people, management down to boots. We need to talk. We need to communicate. We need to look out for one another. And if we're just hiding something and covering it up for the sake of KPIs and bonuses, because that's what it was basically.
Of course.
If they'd had a lost time incident, they wouldn't have got the end of year bonus, the management team. So it was covered up. You can't be offering monetary reward around safety, because it just encourages non-reporting.
Of course it does.
So yeah, that's something else for you to process.
Mate, honestly, God, this is completely bonkers. And to think, like, not to take anything away from your story, to think that this is actually happening regularly through the construction industry and has done and will probably continue to happen, for until more and more and more people are aware of it. It's crazy.
Well,
like, my head can't get around it all.
On that same site, I know 100% that November last year, they had an incident where somebody got run over by, it wasn't bad, but there was a scaffolding fork truck, rough terrain fork truck. He's driving along. I think he had scaff poles on, and the sun was in his eyes, and he didn't see this guy stood near the van on the side of the road. And as he drove up, he ended up running over this guy into the back of his legs. This guy screamed out, so the driver stopped. The on-site ambulance came out to him, took him into the car park, put him into a colleague's car, took him to minor injuries, had a load of scans and x-rays. Luckily, he didn't break anything. They went and picked him up the next morning and put him on light duty for 2 weeks, sat in an office, sorting out paperwork. But then that same company put a post on LinkedIn a few months ago saying, we've gone 3 years without a lost time incident. And it's like, no, you haven't gone 3 years without a lost time incident. You've had lost time incidents. You're just not reporting them.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So,
by the way, it does still happen today.
So, sorry, I've just got to say, I've got this thing in my hand, and when I have difficult conversations, it's like a stress ball for me. This thing has been absolutely ruined throughout the last hour. But God, that's absolutely bonkers. That's bonkers. And it's also so true. Companies say they've gone X amount of time with no accidents. But I've worked on building sites, and I can almost guarantee you nearly every day there is definitely a near miss to be reported, a bit of cable running across the floor which could potentially hurt someone, a bit of barrier on a riser cupboard which is loose, a bit of floorboarding not put down properly. Mate, it happens every single day.
It does.
You know, but how do you manage that? How do you get around to manage that?
And it's the reason I now do what I do with this presentations, with talking to companies, because there's the impactful part there. There's, it happened to me, it can happen to you, it can happen to anyone. There's the mental health journey, which hopefully encourages people to reflect and talk about their own. There's the behavioural safety, how in order to save time, to save money, we often take risks and we become complacent. And then there's the importance of reporting, which is, again, an important part, because, as I said, if that incident had been reported, that guy a few months later might still be with us today. So the ripple effect of an accident, and even the ripple effect of not reporting or communicating something, is massive.
And I think, looking at the construction industry right here, right now, what do you think can be done to improve it? I think reporting is huge, because the more awareness is around it, the more guys will be like, oh yeah, this could potentially happen. Like, but realistically, guys don't really care. Like, when I worked on building sites, you know, the biggest thing that was reported would be I'll be standing on a podium with my head tilted like that because they want me wearing my hard hat while I'm putting up some containment. And it's like, well, that's not really, like, if the concrete ceiling falls on my head, there's a bigger problem to be worried about than my hard hat or not. But I feel like those stupid things are kind of going into the construction world and kind of deterring people to go, well, it's not actually, it's a joke, really, you know. Or if you're standing on the roof and you have to wear a hard hat, if a crane's going to drop something, it's going to squish me. A hard hat ain't going to protect me. Like, how can we make it that it's actually really, really important to talk about it without it kind of being laughed at?
I don't, to be honest, it's been the same as long as I've worked in the industry. Do you know what I mean? It's never changed. And I think, again, communication is key in any business. But I think making the guys feel appreciated and not having to go at them constantly, you know, when something's not done on time, or just showing that appreciation from actually being there and doing a job for you and working improves morale. And then people, when morale's good, people do work to a better standard and they will follow procedures. But if you're a supervisor and you're just having to go at someone all the time and like, get your glasses on, get your helmet on, then people aren't going to do that, but they're also going to take shortcuts in other ways because of the way they're feeling. They're just going to be like, oh, fuck off. Yeah. But if morale is good and everyone works together as a team, people are going to look out for one another and people are going to follow the procedures and do the right thing. So I think for me, it comes down to communication and management, not just coming out on occasion to do a safety audit, but getting out and amongst the people on site. And so everyone knows who everyone is. Because if you feel part of a team, you're going to work better together as well.
Yeah.
So
100%.
I think it's communication. And it's like mental health. There's a lot of companies doing a lot around mental health. Like I'm working with a lot of like Balfour, SCS Rails, HS2, Mace. I've worked with all of them and delivered what I do. And that's amazing in itself, because when I share my presentation, people always reach out. People always want help. People do things differently. People will get in touch and explain situations where they've cut corners and been really, really lucky, or been really, really fortunate. So, but a lot of companies put people through a mental health first aid course. They'll maybe put like 5 office staff or something through a mental health first aid course and think that's enough.
Yeah.
And that's not enough. Like, everybody
100%.
on that site should do that mental health first aid course. Because if everybody did that course, everyone would have a better understanding of the workings of the mind and what to look out for and how to signpost. But just putting a few people, I know for myself, if I was working on a site as a 360 operator and having a massive argument with my wife, or I drank a bottle of vodka last night before I went, and I feel shit, and I'm struggling to pay my bills and I'm feeling down, I'm not going to go to that first aider on site who I work with to let them know that I'm drinking excessively, or I've got a coke problem, or whatever it might be, because they're then going to go and talk to management, who's then going to march me off site.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think companies need to bring an outside organisation in, whether it is like Lighthouse Charity, or whether it's someone like myself, or whatever that might be, bringing them in like once a month, or what, just so that the guys have got someone they know they can talk to, they know they can open up to, and there's going to be no repercussions. It's not going to affect the job. But again, that's just an opinion.
No, you know what? I was having this conversation with, funny enough, mates in mind yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was talking about mental health first aiders, because what I occasionally, if I get a bit of time, I go around building sites and I speak to contractors. And one of the things that got brought up was mental health first aiders. And the exact same things that you're saying right now have been said by contractors. One, I ain't going to trust that guy who I don't fucking like. Why am I going to tell him any of my business? It's true, 100%.
Yeah.
Two, they've got like posters on walls in canteens with people who don't even work in the company no more. So it's a tick box exercise which isn't actually working. And then 3 is exactly what you said. Why am I going to go tell this person my personal business, which is then going to potentially get me kicked off site? Well, not kicked off site, taken off site for a safety reason, but that will also stop my pay. And as we both know, in the construction industry, financials are one of the biggest reasons out there that are affecting contractors on a day-to-day basis, with anxiety, depression, and all the rest of it. It's the method just doesn't make sense. I think having everyone mental health first aid trained would be awesome idea.
Yeah.
But again, it's going to cost companies so much money, they won't do it.
It costs so much money, but then what's the cost if someone has an incident? Do you know what I mean? If something goes wrong, or if someone's off work, there's always ways of balancing it. But yeah, you're right, they won't do it because it is a massive lump, and if they can just do a tick box and they're covered, then that's all they're going to do, innit? But no, I mean, all that, people like myself and you just keep banging that drum and trying to get that message out there, and encourage people to talk, encourage people to communicate and reach out, and
100%.
hopefully businesses start doing things differently. But it's a tough one.
Got to fight for the change, right? Got to fight for it.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, nothing changes if nothing changes. So in my mind, 100%. I've got to be part of that change, and if that means reliving all of this in order to get that across there, and get management and get the higher ups, not just the boots on the ground, to think differently as well. It's all about mindset. If your mindset's in the right place, then everything's going to go well.
Yeah, 100%. This thing, I've actually just seen the time. I've got so lost in this conversation. I said it will be an hour, and I know we've already gone into an hour and 20. So yeah, I'm sorry about that. I should have been more mindful of the time on this, but it's just such a story to share. I just completely lost track of the time there.
You can edit what you want. If you need to cut any out, then
no, there's nothing to cut. There's absolutely nothing to cut. This has been such an intense conversation. And I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out to share your story, all in hope to help one person. And I actually think this is going to help so many people going through such a traumatic time. So, I just want to say, like, one, sorry for taking up more time than I expected. And two, what a story you've got to share. Like, I've got to share. And I'm still speechless. I'm probably going to be thinking about this for a long time. And I said to you, I'll be taking notes, but honestly, I have taken one note because I was just so, I don't know, just into your story. I didn't have time to take it to pen and paper.
As I said, everything happens for a reason. But yeah, if there's so much anybody could take from this conversation we've just had. For me, my main message is, when it comes to your mental health, don't just deal with it. Don't just keep telling yourself and other people you're dealing with it and smiling, because you are carrying a big, heavy rucksack, and all your emotions go into that rucksack. Everything you've ever gone through is in that bag. And no matter how strong you are, eventually it just gets too heavy and it weighs you down. And that's when you end up in that big dark hole. So whatever it is, whether it's something from the past or whether it's something you're going through now, reach out and talk. My details are SK Life Coach UK across all social media. Anybody wants to have a chat, I'm here. So, but yeah, my message
100%.
on top of everything else is just reach out.
Yeah, honestly, it's the hardest thing to do. But like of everything, the first step is always the hardest. And you find once people do reach out, they've actually got a lot more on their mind that they originally thought.
Definitely.
And that's where coaches come in hand, and they're there to support you. So it's best to make use of it. It's, I've personally seen so many coaches throughout my life. Over the last 6 years, I've seen nutritionists, life coaches, relationship coaches, ADHD coaches, and the list just goes on. OCD coaches, and they've changed my life for the better. So yeah,
gives you a different perspective to look at something, rather than just being trapped in your own mind. And and for me, that's what works. So.
Absolutely. But yeah, Steve, honestly, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today. Like, honestly, I feel like there's going to have to be a part 2 to this because there's so much more that we need to talk about and, deep dive into. So, hopefully you'll be up for that sometime in the future.
Anytime, my friend, anytime.
Thank you so much, Steve. I hope you have a good day.
Cheers, Vish, you as well.
Cheers. Bye.